straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt. How are you, mate?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Always good to be chatting to you. Always good to be talking about council things. I get a bit excited about this each week, actually, because there's
Isn't that
so
wonderful?
much,
I do as well, actually, to be honest.
yeah, well, so much that happens each week, and I just want everyone to know about all this stuff
Yes,
that's happening. 'Cause
absolutely.
you get a bit in a bubble of all these exciting things that happen at council, and then you talk to people out there in the rest of the world, the non-council bubble,
Yes.
and you say, oh, what about this exciting thing that's happening, and what about this other fantastic thing? I think, oh, I haven't heard about that. So getting a chance to talk about it with you is great,
Yes.
but also people obviously listen to the podcast, they download it, and it gives them an opportunity to hear more and find out more about what's happening, because there's a lot that goes on. And we've got a large LGA now,
Yes.
7,536 square kilometres approximately. So there's a lot more that goes on when you start to encompass things that are happening in Wellington as well.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's exciting. There's lots of things happening. It's all good news and fantastic.
Mate, look, I must admit, though, when you're, as you say, you're out there, you're walking around, you're meeting people every sort of day and you're hearing this stuff and you're hearing about what's going on there. And that's part of the reason why I must admit I enjoy doing this as well with you. Now, you know what, though, when you're looking out there right now, hasn't it been beautiful with this weather lately from the point of view of the little bit extra rain and how green it's looking around the place as well?
A bit of rain around, and I'm not sure if it was predicted for quite as much as we did get in the end, but I'm not sure that I'd like to be a weatherman, because it's just trying to get your predictions
Yeah,
right.
well, they keep sort of saying we're meant to have this dry winter, but it doesn't really seem to be happening so much so.
No, which is probably good. I mean, every now and again when I hear the farmers talking about the fact that it's been a bit dry, a bit of rain will be needed, it seems to have been coming. So that's always good.
Yes.
And with so many other things happening in our community and our economy really going along quite well, if the farmers in the region, again, we've only got 2.5% of our employment in the Dubbo Regional Council local government area. So it sounds like farming's not that important for Dubbo, but there's not a lot of employment in our LGA, but the farming in the region. So when you go out west of Dubbo and you start to look at all that money that comes through Dubbo
Absolutely.
from the farmers, even though you might look at the data and go, well, farming's not that important, 2.5% is not that much.
It's what they do with that, though, isn't it?
Well, it's not so much the farms that live in our LGA. They're certainly important for that 2.5%, but the farmers around the region, the money they bring to Dubbo is very important for our economy. So you really do notice it when there's a good, strong season.
Yep.
And if we can have a couple of those in a row before the next drought or flood comes along.
The inevitability of that for sure. Yeah.
That's right. But that really bodes well for our economy, with so many other things happening as well.
Yeah. Now, speaking of things happening, it was great to see Samuel Johnson here in town there during the week as well. So, now, did you get a chance to meet Samuel?
I did. Actually, he rang me a few months ago and talked about a whole range of things that he's doing. And look, I think he's very positive in what he wants to do for Dubbo. He wants to put Dubbo on the map. And certainly he did a few things while he's in Dubbo. And actually, he went around the region, visited a few other places around the region. But it's all about getting this precision medicine in Dubbo. Of course, people would be familiar with the story that unfortunately his sister was diagnosed with cancer when she died. Obviously, terrible story from there. But Samuel's turned that around to be a positive, as hard as it is to turn the death of a sibling into a positive. He's really turned that into a positive. He's created this foundation, this charity called Love Your Sister, doing some fundraising for that. He's raised an incredible amount of money, somewhere in the vicinity of $20 million so far.
Wow.
But what he wants to do with that, and where he wants to use Dubbo for this, is he's really talking about precision medicine in terms of cancer treatment, where you really drill down to exactly the right drug that's used for the particular cancer treatment. And he talked about this in very generic terms, but again, the logic makes sense.
Is this genome therapy? Is that the
Correct.
type of stuff?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. And so I won't profess to know enough about the technical details. I really only know what I talked to Samuel about. And again, he did ring me a couple months ago. We had a good conversation on the phone about all of this. And he said, I'm coming to Dubbo, want to sit down and talk to you about it, which he did while he was in Dubbo this week. And so that sounds to me like it's sensible and logical. The exciting part for us is that he wants to use Dubbo as the first.
Right.
Once he gets Dubbo up and going, he believes within 3 years he'll get to the point where it can be self-sustaining. So at the moment, he's doing fundraising for it. That's really the main objective of him being in the region. But after that 3-year time frame, he believes it can be self-sustaining, where essentially the treatments and the money that will be utilised by the government and by pharmaceutical companies basically gets to the stage where it's paying for that process. And because you can do it in a more cost-effective way, where you're not just doing or giving people drugs that should work, you're giving people drugs that will work. Now, I'm probably going too far.
Yep.
You probably should go and read more information on Samuel Johnson's
it certainly
website.
sounds like it's like targeted therapy, and from the start, whereby instead of, I'd suggest, going in like the typical sort of cancer treatment is with chemotherapy, you just sort of you get a handful of drugs, you just get whacked by this handful of drugs, and we hope that out of all of those, that some of them will start to do the trick. This seems to be a way, I'd suggest, where they, right from the start, they do a genome running of the actual type of cancer. They work out from that specifically what type of chemotherapy drugs are going to best be effective, and then they start that from the start, I think. Is that pretty much how this sort of thing works?
Yeah, that's in general terms. And again, I should say that I'm not an expert on the processes.
We both aren't, aren't
that's
we?
right.
That's right.
So I'd recommend people that want to know more details, don't just take my
exactly
general
right.
word for it.
Yes.
Have a look at some of the stuff that he's doing with Love Your Sister. But one of the points that he made, which I thought is absolutely relevant, is that if you live in a regional or remote area in this nation, you're 20% more likely to die from cancer.
Is that right?
Now, that's a big number.
Is that from lack of treatment or lack of facilities, resources?
Lack of facilities.
Or?
And I actually spoke to Samuel about this, and I did separate research several years ago when I was doing some work around trying to promote regional areas and things that are needed in regional areas. And the number that I had from that research was 7. People in regional areas have a life expectancy 7 years less than people living in metropolitan areas, purely down to the access of health facilities.
Right.
Now, one of the things that's interesting on that, the flip side of that, is that the cleaner air and the better environment for you to live in, if all health facilities were the same, you would actually have a longer life expectancy in regional areas because you've got, again, that cleaner air, you've got a shorter commute to work, you've got a much less stressful living environment. But unfortunately, what happens in regional areas, people say, I've got this little lump, I should get it checked out. It's too far to get to someone from a medical perspective to have a look at that. Or you visit your GP and they say you really have some tests on that.
Yeah.
The closest place you can have those tests done might be, if you're out in regional areas further, it might be Dubbo, or it might be in Sydney. Or you need to have ongoing treatment for that. You're going to have to go and have that treatment every day for the next 6 weeks. We haven't got that available here in Walgett or Burke or Warriner. And then some people say, I can't afford to get to treatment. I can't get the transport, a whole range of areas of issues there. But Dubbo can serve a really important part of that whole solution because people from further west, again, those places like the Cobars, the Burkes, the Breeze, etc., they can probably access Dubbo with some reasonable level of ease. Not always that easy, but if you said you've got to go to Sydney, for some of those people there, it's not within their realms of possibility financially, and even just the transportation methods that they might need to get there. They just throw their hands up in the air and say, I'm not going to do that. And I had this great/terrible conversation with a gentleman in Burke when we were out doing Tour to Orock fundraising bike ride for Macquarie Homestay. And he had a conversation with myself and the other bike riders there, and he said, based in Burke, the diagnosis he had and the treatment that he had initially needed him to get to Dubbo for an extended period of time. He said, I simply couldn't afford the motels. I couldn't afford to go to Dubbo for the length of time that I was required to do that. And I'd almost given up to the point of saying, well, I'm just going to have to die earlier. And then he heard about Macquarie Homestay. He could then come to Macquarie Homestay. He could actually afford to stay there because it's basically mostly covered by IPTAS funding, a small amount on top of IPTAS funding. And he had the treatment that he needed. And he spoke to this group of bike riders saying, I'm here today because of previous Tour to Orock rides and the money they've raised for Macquarie Homestay. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have Macquarie Homestay to stay at.
As you say, a sad but a great story from the point of view of getting a really positive outcome.
So these are the sort of things, and I talked to Samuel about some of those sort of stories. So I think in terms of getting Dubbo set up as a central point, absolutely vital. The other nice thing was we did all this at the Western Plains Cultural Centre, and of course, hanging on the wall.
Absolutely. There's a big picture of him right there, isn't there?
Now, he had a good story to tell about that as well. Jeremy Eden painted Samuel. Now, Jeremy Eden lost his mum to cancer.
So there's a connection there, obviously.
He had a connection there. And if you look at that picture that's hanging in the Cultural Centre, and you've only got to the end of July to get along to the Cultural Centre to see all
well, what are we now? Mid-July, sort of, so you've only got a couple of weeks left, if that.
That's right. So go on and see those. And if you look at the picture of Samuel Johnson, which won the People's Choice Prize, didn't win the overall prize, Black Douglas won that, but the People's Choice Prize, and you see Samuel holding a photograph in the actual painting, and that photograph is actually of Jeremy Eden's mother.
Oh,
so many people
okay.
would assume that photograph might be something,
His sister.
Something of significance to Samuel, but it was actually of significance to the artist. So there was a nice linkage there, and again, it was nice to hear a bit more about the story, and of course that was painted during COVID restrictions. There was the problem between Sydney and Melbourne with that, so it had to be done mainly via photos. So he had one posing.
That was it?
Yeah, and then the artist took lots of photos and then used those to paint from rather than a live sitting each time that he was doing work on the painting. So it was an interesting bit of background to that story.
Yes.
But it was nice to be there, and Samuel did make the point that he'd been approached several times before to have someone paint his picture for the Archibald.
Right.
But he really wanted to make sure that whoever painted him, he had some sort of connection with. And when he spoke to Jeremy and he looked at some of Jeremy's previous work, and then the linkage with Jeremy's mum and cancer, he thought, this is the artist to paint me. So he was really happy with the outcome, happy with the painting. And he made the point as well, and have a look at this when you go to the Cultural Centre, most of the portraits there, the people are happy. If you look at the one of Samuel Johnson,
not so much so.
Well,
there's a contemplative sort of look about it.
That's exactly the word I was going to use. I wouldn't say it was a sad look, but he certainly, you can see him deep in thought. He's contemplating, and he said, Jeremy, the artist, said to him, I want you to think about your sister while I get the pose and while I take some photos of that. And so Samuel made the point. He said, I'm sitting there thinking about my sister, which obviously is sad, and it makes me sad even talking about it. He said, it makes me sad talking about it. He said, so it's a bit different to the other paintings here because I'm deep in thought about my sister. I'm missing my sister, and that's what I'm thinking about rather than other ones you look around. People
I think the artist has done a fabulous job in capturing that as well.
Yeah, and all of those paintings there are
they're
brilliant.
very special.
And I love looking at those and just seeing the depth of talent that's there in that room. And you think about all the entries, over 800 entries were put in for the Archibald Prize 2022, and of those, only just over 50 make it to the final stage, and all but one are hanging there in our cultural centre. So get along and have a look this month.
As you say, get down there, folks, and check it out because it's going to close very soon.
And have a look again at Love Your Sister. I'm giving a bit of a plug, I suppose, but have a look at that. And if you feel like you can contribute in some way, shape or form, then Samuel would love to hear from you or love to take some sort of contribution from you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, I think it was last week or the week before on the podcast, we talked about the Benolong Bridge repairs. Now, this is the bridge out there on Benolong Road. I'm right in saying that? Is that right,
Correct.
Matt?
Yep,
Correct,
that's
right? Now, out there on Benolong Road. Now, this bridge has some structural damage done to it, and because of that, the load limit has had to have been reduced. Now, it appears as though while the new bridge is being fixed, you've managed to sort of decide as a council to maybe repair this bridge so that the load limit can then be increased again. Is this correct, Will?
Yeah, basically that's it. So the bridge we had to impose a 15-tonne load limit on it. We've got a new bridge being put in. We've got the budget for that. We've got some funding for that bridge. We've done some land acquisition, some compulsory land acquisition around the bridge there to basically make it a better path for people to drive across the new bridge once it's constructed.
Good.
And we've got a plan there that by April next year, April 2024, that new bridge will be up and done and constructed.
Wow, that's pretty quick, really, when you think about it.
It's a lot of planning that's gone into this stage, so we didn't decide yesterday.
I was thinking normally these things take a bit longer than that, but that's really impressive. Well done.
It's taken a while to get to this point, but when our staff were out there doing some work preparing for that, they noticed that the old bridge, the existing bridge now, which doesn't look like it's in great condition, but structurally it's been sound and people have been using that bridge.
Yeah.
We had some staff look at that and looked at the fact that some of the major structural beams looked like there were some cracks in them. So very quickly they got some experts in, some engineers in to look at that, and they immediately said, you've got to reduce the load limit. You've got to reduce it down to 15 tonnes. Now, that's not great for all the farmers mainly in that area, but people that need to use that bridge for transporting various goods. Even I had one farmer talk to me about the fact that sometimes he might walk some of the cattle from one side of that bridge to another because he's got farms on both sides of the creek there, and walking them across there. Now, if you've got a 15-tonne load limit...
It's probably only 15 cattle.
Well, they're not quite that heavy, but...
That's probably true, actually. You're right. They're probably about 300 k's each, aren't they?
Yeah, 300 or 400, but you probably get to the stage where you might end up with, say, 30 or 40 cows going across that bridge. Suddenly you've hit the load limit. So you've got to count them off. Okay, we've hit a certain number. Right, now just wait till they're off and then we can move some more on there. things like that.
How do you control that with cattle?
Oh,
That'd be
that's
fun.
exactly right. But there was certainly an incredible cost that people in that area have said to me, an incredible cost to them for having to go around the detour. And this is more once harvest season hits.
Yeah.
And so some of them even said to me, if there's repairs that aren't going to be too expensive, we'll even contribute if you need, which I think was a very generous offer from some of those farmers there in that area.
This bridge is to the people in that area there.
Correct. Now, we didn't just put a load limit on a 15 tonne and say, that's it, bad luck, we'll just move on. As part of that process, we did say, load limit immediately. And the example I've given is I compare it to when you're at the airport, you're about to catch a flight, and then the announcement comes over and says the pilots have done an inspection and they've got a safety concern about the plane, so we're not going to fly yet. Not too many people storm the counter and say, I don't care about the safety issue, I don't care about the light being on.
I want to get to Sydney.
That's right, I want to get down there straight away,
right.
fly regardless.
Yeah.
People get a bit annoyed or frustrated or disappointed, but they don't say, let's just fly anyway.
Yeah, that's
they
right.
respect the safety side of it.
Absolutely.
And that was the conversation I had with farmers out around the area. They respected the safety. I don't want to be the mayor of a council that says, she'll be right, mate. And then we have someone in their truck or their header or whatever it might be at the bottom of that creek, knowing that, well, we knew about that. We could have stopped it, but it'll be right.
But, well, actually, look, you're spot on there. And in regards to, so from a council's perspective, what sort of money are we talking here just for the repairs?
Well, that was the first thing we had to do. We had to find out how much.
Yeah.
We've identified an issue. We've immediately put a 15-tonne load limit on it. Then we've said, okay, now we need some engineers to have a look at this to see if we're going to do some repairs on that, what would it cost us and how quickly could we do it, keeping in mind that by April next year, we'll have a new bridge in place. So if they came back and said, you needed to spend $1 million on it, we'd say, well, hold on, I don't think we should be spending $1 million on that. We've got some money we're spending on a new bridge. Maybe that's more important to spend that kind of money on.
Yeah.
So get us an idea of a price and get us an idea of a time frame so we can actually make a decision on that.
Yeah.
So we had the engineers come back to us very quickly, which I was very impressed with, and they said it's going to cost you $119,000 to repair that,
Yep.
and we can get it done by the middle of September.
Okay.
Which gets it done in a short enough time frame that we think obviously will help out farmers around that harvest time. So we
That
basically
seems
said,
like a pretty reasonable outcome to me, personally.
well, again, I'd prefer not to spend $119,000, but I also understand the importance of that.
Yeah.
And we haven't gone back to the farmers in that area and said, okay, everyone cough up 10 grand and then we'll go ahead with it.
Yep.
We've said, no, we think this is an important enough piece of council infrastructure. This is part of our infrastructure. This isn't a part of infrastructure that's controlled by the state government, for example, or owned by the state government. We as a council own this, so we'll own the problem.
Yep.
$119,000, we'll go ahead and get that repair done.
So once that repair is done, the load limit will be able to go back to its normal load limit?
Yeah, that's right. 44 tonnes is the typical load limit of most bridges you see in a local road network, and that's the load limit that people expect for loading up their various vehicles. So when that repair is done, by the middle of September, that'll be back to the 44-tonne limit.
That'd be great because harvest normally comes up around November, December and things like that as well. So.
That's right. So, and it's not too bad a time frame in terms of where we are now. It's really 2 months or a little bit less than 2 months, which seems fairly reasonable for a fairly major construction. One of the things that's interesting is probably the longest part of that is actually getting the timbers, the actual materials that we need to do the repair.
Yep.
The actual repair job will take less time than the
actually
sourcing
getting
the materials.
Oh,
which is a bit of an indication of what we see.
We're, I think, across the building industry in general, isn't
Correct,
it, right now?
that's
That's
exactly
it,
right. Yeah.
Now, Matt, I noticed here that during the week that you're involved in a community safety workshop. Now, is this in response to a lot of the talk in regards to what it's been, I suppose, just general crime in town? Is this a way that council is looking at maybe addressing this as an issue?
Yes and no.
Okay.
To make it clear for you.
Rightio.
We have had some discussion at council, obviously, about crime in the community. And the frustrating part for us is that the two issues that people talk to me about in relation to crime is policing. Well, for a start, I actually think the police do a fantastic job.
Yes.
But we don't control them. We are in no way, shape or form in control of policing. I've said it to you before.
Yes.
Tim Chin, the commander for this area at the moment, if I walked into his office and said, Tim, I need you to go and send some police down this area, he'd say, who are you? Now,
Yeah, that's right.
He's a gentleman. He wouldn't be rude to me, I'm sure, but he would
It's
say...
not your jurisdiction to fall and make those comments anyway.
That's exactly the point. He doesn't answer to council, doesn't answer to me. He answers to the state government. And if the Minister for Police said do something, I'm sure Tim would respond to that. The second part that people tell me is that we need the sentencing laws stronger. We need to lock up these people that are doing this sort of stuff. Now, there's a whole range of argument about whether locking people up is effective. I don't want to get into that particular debate and discussion. But again, council doesn't set sentencing laws. The state government decides what the penalties are for various crimes. Now, people also tell me that the magistrates are too soft, and again, that's a whole other argument I don't want to enter into. But the whole idea of telling magistrates how to go about their sentencing, the magistrates are designed very specifically to be independent, and so even the state government doesn't start to tell the magistrates what to do. The whole independence of the magistrates is very important to our legal system. So we don't control any of that. Now, you may remember there was a concept or a discussion brought forward to council for a resolution about holding a crime summit.
I do remember it, yes.
And so councillors debated that topic, and as a result of that, councillors decided not to go ahead with the crime summit. We didn't think that would be good in terms of solving the problems because we don't get the chance to use any of our powers to actually solve any of the problems. And all it seemed like it was going to do was to advertise to the world that, hey, we've got crime in Dubbo. Obviously, you've got crime in all across the state.
Yep. We'll talk about that soon, actually, as well. There's some other things we can talk about with that, yes.
Yeah, and so we don't think councillors made a decision not to go ahead with any sort of crime summit because it seemed like it would be advertising that our problem is particularly worse than anywhere else in the state, which I don't think it is. And when you look at some of the latest crime data, which we've talked about before, again, you just look at that rolling 12-month and the change in the first quarter of this year. I quoted some of these figures before. For example, motor vehicle theft, which people often talk about, across the entire state went up by 4.6%. Across the Dubbo Regional Council, LGA, it went up by 0.3%. So it still went up, but across the state, it went up a lot worse. Break and anti-individual dwelling, for example, went up by 1.2% across the state, went down by 6.5% in the Dubbo Regional Council area. Sexual assault went up by 0.6% in the state, down by 16.3% in the Dubbo Regional Council area. Again, this isn't saying there's no crime in Dubbo, but our police and the processes that are in place are aware of this. They're taking action, and I think they're having a fairly reasonable effect on it. I'd love to see zero crime, absolutely. But I also live in the real world and realise there's going to be crime.
Now, Matt, look, one of the things I want to talk to you about too in regards to crime is that across some sections of our community, look, you have been accused of the fact that you're literally burying your head in the sand over crime in Dubbo. So what's your response to that?
One of the things that's really important, I think, is to know the powers that you have, no matter what your job is, whether you're a school teacher or whether you're a mayor or whether you're a state government representative, knowing what your powers are. One of the things that I've often said is, yes, we've got crime in Dubbo, obviously. And again, I've said you've got crime across the state. Do I feel unsafe walking down the main street in Dubbo? If I have to go down to a supermarket at night time and walk into a supermarket, I don't feel unsafe at all. There are certain parts of the state that I would feel unsafe, but I don't feel unsafe in Dubbo. And I think the police and the sentencing processes we have in place are working. Would I like to see them work better? Absolutely right. There is crime, but I don't think it's of value to anyone at all in this council area, and I'm the mayor of this council area. I don't think there's any value and of any help to anyone in this council area for me to be jumping up and down, whether it be on national media, whether it be in local media or anywhere, saying Dubbo is terrible for crime. Everyone stay away from Dubbo because crime is terrible. There is crime everywhere. I don't want to drive people away from coming to Dubbo. I don't feel like having tourists come to Dubbo is suddenly putting their lives at risk, no more than if they go to anywhere else in the state and they go and park their car and walk into a supermarket or do whatever they might do. So I've never said there's no crime. What I have said is that the crime that we've got doesn't make most people feel unsafe, and the crime that we've got, you've got the correct authorities that are working on that. Now, what can we do as a council about that? Well, what we came up with from that last resolution where there was an attempt to hold a crime summit, which again I think would be wrong for a whole range of reasons, and council resolved that way. What we did say is we'll look at some community safety processes. What can we do to make our community safer and feel safer? And so one of the outcomes from that was to hold some workshops. And we held the first of those workshops this week. That workshop was held with the police and with councillors and some of our council staff. And really that was just a discussion around some of the general feeling about how we feel in the community and what we can feel about crime and what we would like to see with crime. Now, there were issues that came up in that discussion.
Yep.
Parental control was one of the issues that came up. What can we do as a council? And one of the councillors in that discussion said some of these issues are obviously big picture, multi-generational, intergenerational issues. How are we going to solve that as a council? We just simply don't have the power. The best we can do is get some groups together. Now, there's 2 more workshops to come in this series that we've created from that resolution. Yep. And again, the first one started off with the police and with councillors. The next 2 will involve other organisations, broader organisations. Yep. If the best we can do, and it probably is about the best we can do, is to get some of these different agencies, some of them are government agencies, some of them are non-government agencies, but get some of these agencies that have got the responsibility to do something about crime. If we can get them together, if council can help them come to the table and discuss things, then I think we've achieved something.
Well, this is probably one of the things I suggest that, again, probably members of the community will probably turn around and say, well, you're the mayor. Can't you jump up and down enough and shout loud enough to state governments and authorities who are involved in the resolution of crime around the place? Can't you do something about that?
People also tell me that they don't like the fact that their home loan repayments are going up because the interest rates are going up. Can you fix that problem for us as well? Well, no. Philip Lowe is probably not going to listen to a mayor of Dubbo saying, can you put the interest rates down, please, Philip, because our residents are suffering. There's a whole range of areas of responsibility that are way outside the control of council. We can send off letters, we can have discussions with various ministers, and we do that. As a council, we do have those discussions, we do send letters off, but again, we can't make it happen. That's the critical thing here. We can have those discussions. We do. I meet with the police. We have a regular scheduled meeting with the police, and I sit down with the police and we sit down and have that discussion. I'm not telling them anything new. Yep. If I say, hey, Tim, some people out there are concerned about crime, Tim doesn't say, what? Really? I wasn't aware of that. Tim knows the Boxar stats way better than I do. I look at the Boxar stats and I look at the crime and I look at how it compares, and I've just quoted some stats before that are straight from Boxar, but Tim knows those better than I do. The police know those better than I do. Yep. The sentencing processes, the magistrates, the state government, they know those figures inside and out, upside down. They create those stats. Boxar, Bureau of Crime, Statistics and Research, is a government department, a state government department. So I can't tell anyone anything new. Yep. I'm not going to be able to have some revelation suddenly. And sometimes people say to me, what are you doing about crime? And I say, well, I don't control any of it. What would you like me to do? Tell me your idea. What do you think as a council and as a mayor, we've talked about this before, I don't have any power at all. The only power I have is to be the spokesperson and represent council decisions. So you've got 10 councillors there. What would you like a resolution of council to do to direct someone to do? Well, go and tell them to make sentencing tougher. Well, we couldn't actually do it. It would be a resolution that would make no sense. But let's say we had a resolution of council to say, toughen up sentencing. We can't make anyone do that. We could have a resolution that says, we'd like sentencing to be tougher. But the state government doesn't have to listen to that. We don't control the state government. So this is the thing. You've got to make sure that you're working on things that you can control.
Can you do things like then, I don't know, maybe go and sort of say, we want more police here in town? Certainly.
We can make that representation. And I've sent off letters to the police minister, for example, to say we want more policing in Wellington. We want 24-hour policing presence in Wellington. And we sent off that letter and we get a polite letter back from the minister that says, thanks very much for your letter, duly noted. Again, do we make things happen with those? Probably not. Again, the best we can do is represent those things. Now, the thing is, what you've got to be careful of is, I've talked about Benolong Bridge. We do control that. We've got to make sure that the things that are under our control, the things that we do control, if we get too distracted by all these other things that people say, well, why don't you go and chase that up? Then the things that we can control, potholes or roads or collecting rubbish bin, those things, we lose sight of what we should be doing. And take a football team, for example, where you're saying to the forwards, your job is to take the ball up the middle, and then we've got the backs there ready to score tries when we spin it out through the back line. If suddenly all the forwards are out in the back line getting in the road, you're not doing your job. The coach gave you a job. Your job is to go and take the ball up the middle. then leave it for the backs to go and do their job. And it's a bit the same as this. You've got to make sure that you know what your job is. Yep. We've got a Local Government Act that says fairly clearly, there's some ambiguous areas in there, but fairly clearly what our responsibilities are. At no stage in the Local Government Act does it say we control the police or we control sentencing. Sure, we can represent our community, and sending off a letter or having a conversation with various ministers is about as far as we go. But again, they know about these things already. They're in that position for a reason. They haven't got their head buried in the sand. And the same as if I rang a minister and said, now look, can you come out here and make sure that our bin is collected each morning on time? Why am I doing that? That's not my job. My job is to focus on this area. Yep. So again, you've really got to know what your job is, what your position is.
So if we go back then to the community safety workshop, and you had the first one there during the week, what external agencies are involved in this workshop that, from the community perspective, they can feel as though that there are people coming into this workshop that could maybe make a difference?
So the first one only had the police as the only external agency.
Are there any others coming in on this? Or
that was, again, the design of that first one. And then as we go forward to the other workshops, and our staff are organising these, they'll bring in other groups. So they'll bring in the Department of Communities and Justice, for example. So there's another department that will come in along with the police, I imagine. You might get juvenile justice involved. Yep. You might get someone that is involved in sentencing processes. You might get some people who are non-government agencies working on some of the homeless issues that we might have in the region, for example. So you get a variety of agencies, and I can't rattle off to you all the agencies, but getting them in the one room together, sometimes that might be where a council can make a positive difference, because different agencies might be working on their little patch and not really looking across the way to see what someone else is doing. One thing that we may have identified already is that a lot of these agencies, both government and non-government agencies, they might work during business hours largely because their staff are working during business hours. So we might be over-serviced during the day, but then at night time might be under-serviced. Is there some way we can help address that problem, for example? Yep. But again, we wouldn't be the ones addressing it. We simply don't have the budget or the power to go and address it. Yep. The best we can do is to get different groups talking. But again, it's a bit insulting to say to these groups, council, we'll come along and we'll fix the problem for you. They're all doing their work, and I think in the main...
I'm sure they're all aware of the fact that if there's problems in an area, that they would know about it.
That's right. And in the main, I think they all do a really good job. Whenever I've talked to any of those individual groups, any of those individual departments or organisations, I think, they're doing a really good job. Now, are they solving the problems that people would like to have them solve today? Probably not. And there's a whole range of reasons. And again, some of these problems we've got have been built up over multi-generations of issues. It's pretty hard to expect, or even maybe a bit simplistic to expect, that you click your fingers and suddenly you've got a solution to all of these problems. So these are tough problems. We've got government departments working on these tough problems. Council can't really solve these problems. And I suppose that's the point I make. We've got enough to do in the things that we've been tasked to do. And again, if I use your example at school, if someone said, Mark, I don't think the syllabus is right for Year 12 English, can you go and fix that problem? But also make sure you keep teaching your kids, your current classroom of kids, the exact syllabus we've got now, because we've got a HSC coming up, but just go and change the syllabus as well. Well, it's not just a little job for you as a teacher to go along and change the syllabus. It's a whole big process that's got lots of people working on the syllabus on a constant basis to make sure it's relevant, up to date, new texts might be coming in, all sorts of things. Gee, how do I solve that problem? There might be a parent who says, Mark, go and solve that problem for me. It's not really that easy for you to solve the problem. And meanwhile, while you're trying to solve that problem, you're ignoring your current students. You've got a job to do and make sure those students are educated and do a fantastic job, which you do a great job at. Again, you can't do everything, I suppose. You've got to make sure you comply with what you've got to do.
So as a final message then, in regards to this, to the residents of Dubbo, as the Mayor speaking out in regards to their fears and concerns about crime in town, what would you say?
I still go back to the data. I look at the data and I still say that, yes, we have crime in Dubbo. Yes, we have crime in Orange, in Bathurst, in Wellington. We have crime across the state. Do I feel unsafe walking down the street in Dubbo? Not necessarily. I feel like I'm okay in Dubbo. It doesn't feel like, in Sydney we see people walk out of a gym in the morning and someone's being gunned down beside them. I don't see that happening in Dubbo. the last 12 months, and when you look at the data that compares that rolling data, for example, that I talked about before, when I look at that and I look at one of the stats which says murders, well, in Dubbo it says NA, not applicable. We don't have murders in Dubbo. Across the state it's actually gone down by 17%, which is good as well.
Yep.
But again, there was that issue in the paper, and I don't want to pick on any other areas. I've got other mayors that I speak to from other areas on a regular basis, but there was that issue that popped up, and one of the newspapers had a wild night of crime across Orange, Bathurst, Benolong and
Yes,
Carcourt.
I saw that, and it was on the news there the other night as well. It opened up with an issue there of 6 guys that they caught on a video camera breaking into a house in Bathurst, and on the same night there were burnt-out cars in Orange. Same night they had burnt-out cars in Molong. So this seems to be, from what I can gather, the same issues which people are raising here in Dubbo, and not just here. They're all over the place, and particularly around the Central West right now we're seeing this.
And you've got to be careful that you don't try and make Dubbo look worse than everywhere else. So there is crime, and again, we've seen some of those reports in other areas.
Yep.
You don't want to make Dubbo look like it's worse, because you do get that reputation then, and that harms tourism, that harms people moving to your community, that harms your entire reputation, and it can take a long time for a negative perception to be eradicated. Now,
Absolutely.
way back in 2005, we had issues with the Gordon estate, the old Gordon estate, which doesn't exist anymore. Riots was the word, that's right.
Yes.
Now, I was on council at the time, I wasn't the mayor at the time, but hearing people, I had friends of mine ringing from City saying, mate, are you okay out there? You've got riots out there. Well, they weren't riots. Sure, they burnt out a police car in Gordon estate. That's not good. But riots mean riots. I imagine that people are marching down the main street of Dubbo with pitchforks and with burning fires and effigies and maybe the national flag being burnt. I didn't really know what was going on in Gordon estate when I walked down the main street of Dubbo. So it wasn't riots throughout Dubbo. But again, it took a long time for us to get past that. The last thing that I want to do as mayor of this community is leave a reputation for some terrible crime spree. Now, again, I'm not having a go at the mayor of the day. Alan Smith was mayor at the time. I'm not saying it was his fault that riots were being reported, but I'll do everything I can to protect a good reputation in Dubbo. And that doesn't mean burying your head in the sand. That means taking the appropriate action and also understanding my powers. That's a really important thing. Don't think you're more powerful than you really are, even to the point where people say, what are you doing about it? About anything. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's Benolong Bridge or whatever it might be. One of the things that I've said many times is that a mayor is largely powerless. A mayor is representative of decisions of council. And I represent those decisions of council, and I take that very seriously, that I don't go off willy-nilly and quote a whole range of things. I mean, the 3D printer toilet's been an interesting one. I did... people talked about that and say, oh, this is a great little project of yours. I said, well, it's not a project of mine. It was brought to council. Matt Wright, as a councillor, brought it to council as a notice of motion, and then council discussed it, debated it, and then we resolved as a council that, yes, we would go forward with a 3D printer toilet. So it wasn't my little pet project or my little thing that I wanted to do. It was a good, sensible process that I fully supported.
Which you promoted and this sort of stuff in a positive way.
And that's part of my job. If you look at the roles of the mayor, it's to be the spokesperson for council resolutions, for council decisions. Further than that, then when we put that out to tender, a tender came back. Now, if councillors didn't like the idea of a 3D printer toilet, when we got the tenders, councillors could have said, no, we've changed our mind. We don't want to go ahead with this now. We accept no tenders and go back to a traditional method of construction. So councillors have actually voted on it twice to go ahead with a 3D printer toilet. And again, I think it's a great project, but that's my official position because I'm the spokesperson for council. So even if I thought it was terrible, I would have to, by virtue of the Local Government Act 1993, I would have to say what a great project it was. So my hands are tied to a certain extent. That's my job as the mayor. I accept that job as mayor, and I'm happy to keep doing that. But again, it's ridiculous for anyone to think that the mayor's got this unlimited power to do whatever the mayor, he or she, wants to do in a community. The mayor is bound by what the council decisions are.
Now, speaking of voice and where things work within what our capabilities are, there's obviously a big referendum vote coming up very soon on the voice. Now, we don't have to go back into the details in regards to what this is all about. We only have to watch the news in the morning, at night. There's plenty of talk about the voice. But from local council perspective, do we have a role to play here?
It's a really interesting one, actually. Some councils across the nation, and I've talked to some of the mayors and councillors at some of these councils, have taken a formal position. I haven't actually heard of any council that's taken a formal position of saying we encourage our residents to vote no in the referendum. Certainly I've come across some that have encouraged the residents to vote yes. So they've got a formal position on council to vote yes. Now, we've discussed this at council and we've got a formal resolution that we've come up with, which is a bit different to that. One of the issues that we certainly discussed at council was we don't think it's council's position to tell you how to vote. We don't do it for a state election. We don't do it for a federal election. Certainly don't do it for local government elections.
Yep.
Why would we tell people when it's a referendum where in the secrecy of your polling booth you tick a box beside a yes or a no? That's our whole democracy is based on the fact that it's a secret ballot. You don't have people with guns. You don't have people unfairly or unduly influencing a vote. Why would a council go and start directing an entire community to vote in one way or the other? So we've very deliberately said that's not our role to play. But we've got a resolution of council that says we think we've got a role to play in education.
Right.
And we've worked through that process. We've done a workshop on that already. We've talked about how does that play out? What does that look like? What sort of education? How do we help that? Because the Australian Electoral Commission will be doing some of that, and there'll be various national campaigns that we'll see for yes and for no. So there'll be people out there, but we think at a local level we can still play a role.
So
there.
how's that going to look like from the point of view of council with educating people on the voice?
I don't know.
Okay.
And I haven't got a resolution to back me up on this. All I've got is a resolution that says we will look at some things, we'll look at a workshop, and we'll come forward. There'll be a report that will go to council, and council will debate that at a council meeting, and we'll formally resolve exactly what it might look like. Now, might it look like just some social media posts? Might we do some advertising, pay some money for some advertising on making sure you find out the information? Might we run a panel, for example, where we have a couple of people for the yes and a couple of people for the no, and have a public meeting where people can hear about that? All sorts of options we've talked about, but I've got no formal resolution to go forward with at this stage yet, but we will have that. The greatest frustration that I have personally, this isn't a formal council position, but personally, is I'd like to know a date. It's between October and December, which sounds like November because it's the only month that falls between October and December. Maybe second or third weekend in November is kind of the date that's been talked about. But when we want to talk about, there's a big vote coming up, an incredibly important vote for our nation coming up on sometime in the future.
That's right, yes.
It'd be nice to have that definite date because I think that makes it easier. One of the things we've talked about in our workshops is really getting to the point where we tell people to register to vote.
Yes.
We've had people die in world wars to protect our democracy. Make sure that you honour the sacrifice people have made and actually register to vote and actually go and vote. So that'll be part, I imagine, of our education
so potentially
program.
more of the practical elements surrounding the referendum itself.
The practical elements,
The
but
nature
also
of it, how it
giving
works and things like that.
Yeah, but also giving some people some pointers about here are the arguments on the yes side, here are the arguments on the no side. Make sure you do your research.
Yes.
We certainly, from our resolution of council at this stage, we certainly won't be directing people for a yes or a no. We'll certainly be saying...
Well, you are representatives of all people, aren't you?
Correct, that's right. And we'll be saying, make sure you do your research, make sure you educate yourself, and make sure you're enrolled to vote. They're the sort of things, what that will look like. I'll be able to tell you once we've got a resolution exactly what that looks like. But there's a whole range of different options in terms of how that might look.
Okay. Now, I'm sure at some point in time in my driving career I've probably done this. I'd like to say I haven't, but chances are I probably have. And that is in regards to, well, let's just say parking in bus zones in the CBD. I try to avoid it, like everybody, do the right thing. You know, I don't necessarily want to get fined for parking in the wrong place. I'd much prefer to simply just go down and go about my business. But is this becoming more of a problem where people are parking in bus zones in the CBD?
It's becoming enough of a problem that we actually put out a media release about it during the week.
Yeah, right.
To say, have a look on the sign. Now, the bus zones in our CBD are typically applicable from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, and then 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Saturdays. Now, I've driven down past the front of Dubbo Square, for example, and I've sometimes seen people park there, and I'm thinking to myself, it's not 9:30, I'm sure they shouldn't be parked there, but people do park there because they think, oh, it's at night time. No,
so
bus
7
come
a.m.
along.
to 9:30 p.m.
Yeah,
so
Monday to
basically
Friday.
may as well say the whole day.
Just about. Given the fact that Coles now closed at 9,
Yes.
you wonder why you'd be going there and park there after 9:30 to go into Coles, for example. The other one I've seen regularly, and this goes back for many years now, is that along that spot, and this is one particular spot right in front of Dubbo Square, it's parallel parking for one section there where the bus stop is.
Yep.
Often I do see people when they do park late at night or on Sundays, for example, they'll park 45-degree angle parking.
Which doesn't work really well around there because that's a pretty tight little squeeze through there.
Correct. And it means the back of your car sticks out a little bit on the road. But again, people see further down the road angle parking. So, I'll just park angle parking. It must be that. Again, knowing the road rules and checking signs is all very important. One of the issues is that we don't have our parking officers out at night time paroling, but police can fine you there as well.
Okay.
So that's one issue.
Yep.
The bus, and I have seen buses try and stop there, which holds up some traffic to let people on the bus, even though there are some cars parked there. So I'm sure it's not great for the bus driver.
No,
they would
the
see that
safety element as well, I'm sure.
they'd see that as dangerous. We might have to, and certainly we haven't said that we do this, but we might have to ask our staff occasionally to go along at night time and find a few people there. And it's not cheap. $283 you can get fined down there if you're parking in there outside or inside the times that you shouldn't be parking there. So it's certainly something that I suppose we'd want to highlight.
That's $283 better spent at one of the shops in town.
Exactly right. Yeah, a whole range of ways you could spend that better
Absolutely.
than giving it to council. So just be aware of that. Make sure you know about those bus zones and just check the signs, I suppose, is the important thing. If you do park there, just have a look, wait up, I shouldn't be parked here, jump in your car and drive on.
I think you've just pretty much nailed it from the point of view. Just remember, folks, 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. You may as well say for the entire day, that bus zone is a bus zone. Don't
Monday to
park
Friday.
there. Monday to Friday.
I'm talking
weekends a little bit different.
I'm talking about the Dubbo CBD, so it's not just that one at Dubbo Square, but that's one I see regularly, but that's in the Dubbo CBD.
Yeah. Millers Lane, there's been a bit of work going on up there. Seems to be progressing pretty well. Drove past there the other day and it's looking very impressive. Are we in front of time?
You're going to hear me say something that people don't normally associate with council.
Yes.
And you are right. We are ahead of schedule.
Hey, how good's that? There it is.
Now, we did talk about it before, the fact that we would be expecting that to be finished sometime around the end of September.
Right, yes.
But again, sometimes it's outside our control. The weather's been good to us.
Yeah.
Things have been progressing quite well. We're looking at the moment that we should have this project finished probably by the end of August.
Oh,
so somewhere around
it's impressive.
a month.
There's only 4 weeks difference there.
Yeah, that's right. Somewhere around a month in advance of schedule.
Yeah.
Now, you will see next week some traffic opening up there, maybe towards the end of next week.
Okay.
Again, there'll still be openings and closings at various points. You'll see some new bitumen laid down there, and that surface for that section should be similar to the new Boundary Road extension, where people obviously are pretty happy with that particular road there. It's done very well up there.
Yep.
So that's all good, but you still will see some closures there because there'll be some line marking. So it might open and close a bit over the next month and a half, but by the end of August, all those works there should finish. And it's a long detour when you've got to go right up to Sheraton Road to get around that particular section there. So I've heard people talk about the fact that they think about their trip and I've got to go down through there. And it made it worse during the week. And it wasn't our staff doing this work, but there was some work being done on the railway crossing on Fitzroy Street.
Yep.
So people were thinking,
worse.
well, people were thinking, I'll go around that. And there was one of the boom gates that's being worked on down there. Oh, I'll fix up. I won't go down Fitzroy Street. I'll just duck up and go along. Oh, hold on, there's more roadworks there. I've had to go all the way up to Sheraton Road, is what some people told me. So it was a big detour to try and avoid some of that traffic there. But going ahead of schedule, well done to our staff. Keep up the great work.
Great job. Now, in regards to the next little one, Matt, about a community information day around the Wellington area. Now, this is about the renewable energy zone. So I know we've talked about this a fair bit on our podcast. This is a zone, it's an area around Wellington where there's so much activity happening. So does it sound like to me, reading through this, that Council's going to be running a bit of an open day, a bit of a community day to find out more about what's actually going on in this renewable energy zone? It's
a bit confusing for people because we talk about the renewable energy zone and people see wind turbines, they see solar farms down around the Bedenga area next to Wellington, and people often tell me, oh, that renewable energy zone looks great. Well, and I'm being a little bit pedantic here, but that's actually not part of the renewable energy zone. The renewable energy zone, and this is the Central West Orana renewable energy zone, refers specifically to projects that will connect to the new Energy Co transmission lines, which haven't been constructed yet.
Oh,
so
okay.
all of that work that's being already completed down there, and more work that's going ahead. Lightsource BP is building a new 400 megawatt solar farm. There's a new wind farm that's going ahead that'll have over 100 turbines in it. All of that at this stage that you've seen down there is not part of the res. Some of the new projects will be part of the res.
Right.
We actually thought it might make sense for us as a council to hold some information days, some information sessions, maybe in Wellington, maybe around the villages. We haven't actually nutted it out yet in full detail, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning just to let people know that
It's
things
coming
are
up,
happening.
basically. Yeah.
That's right. And we want to make sure the community's educated, informed. I think it's really exciting. Our council thinks there are a huge number of opportunities. And I attended a community reference group meeting of the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone during the week.
It's quite a tongue-tying event of the word, isn't it?
Is a bit. And one of the things that we heard at that particular meeting was very exciting, I thought. Not everyone in the room was as excited as I was, but we've heard discussions in the past about our res being a 3 gigawatt res.
Yep.
It was announced, I'm not sure if announced is the right word, we were informed at this particular CRG meeting during the week that already that res will go from 3 gigawatts to 4.5 gigawatts by around 2028, and the plan will be to go to a 6 gigawatt res.
Double the size.
Double the size.
Wow.
Now, again, some people in the room were concerned, some people who don't like the idea of renewable energy, but I was excited because what that means for us is that there'll be twice as many projects in our res, which means we'll have more construction, more money injected into our economy. Overall, a very exciting announcement.
More opportunities for those community funds and things like that, as you're saying
all
as well.
of that, all of those things there.
Yeah.
That will be done with the same size transmission lines, the transmission lines that have been planned. They don't need to expand those and make those larger at this stage. So all very exciting, but keep an eye out or an ear out. We'll get to the point where we'll do some information days. We'll talk about some of those. We'll make some announcements around some dates. But I just think it's important that the community fully understands what's happening around there because, again, some people are scared about it if they don't know about it.
Yes.
If they're fully informed, they can make a more informed decision whether to be scared or excited. And again, I'm in the excited camp.
Yeoval, the great little town of Yeoval. Now, one thing I didn't realise, Matt, was the fact that part of Yeoval, or at least North Yeoval, falls under the realm of our wonderful area of the Dubbo Regional Council. Is this about to change?
Well, not about to change, but we hope will change in the near future.
Right. So there's potentially a change.
That's right. We've started some discussions. You've got Buckenbar Creek that goes along. Buckenbar Creek.
Just don't say that too quickly.
That's right. There's the creek that goes along and cuts off a bit of North Yeoval, and that was the old boundary between Cabonne Shire and Wellington Shire Council.
Right.
With the amalgamation, I do remember having a conversation with Mike Baird about this one day. I said, maybe with the amalgamation, this is the amalgamation proposed back in, or that occurred in 2016. I said, there might be some support in some areas across the state, Mike, when he was the Premier, that you might have some people who think that changing some boundaries of council areas would make sense. And Mike told me that all they're going to do, if they did amalgamations at all, which obviously they did, was to join some councils together. It was a whole other process to change boundaries. Not a great outcome for Dubbo at the time and Wellington at the time. Both areas disagree with it, but we've got what we've got now. But one of the things that's interesting, and I did go to a public meeting in Yeoval. In fact, Richard Ivey, the Deputy Mayor, came along with me there and we talked to Yeoval residents there. They've got some things that they want to see happen in North Yeoval under Dubbo Regional Council's responsibility. And they've got other areas they want to see change in Yeoval, which is under Cabonne Shire. And it's just confusing for the residents there. They don't really care what happens. One of the things that we talked about on that particular day, which was one of those classic little bits of frustration, is that when we have things where we've got to do maintenance work, mowing the sides of the road, for example, doing work in North Yeoval.
So you get to the creek line, you've got to stop.
Well, we've got teams that we send out from Wellington to go out and do maintenance work there. Across the creek, you've got Cabonne Shire doing that work. Someone suggested, could we just pay Cabonne Shire to do that? And I said, well, that's a great idea, and we've actually started some discussions around that. But it would make more sense that North Yeoval was part of...
I was going to say, it makes even more sense. It's just combine the two together and make it under one jurisdiction, so to speak.
Absolutely right. So the CEO from Dubbo and the general manager from Cabonne have already had some discussions. I'll now send a formal letter off to the Mayor to say we think it would make sense to have a boundary adjustment. Exactly where that is, we'll work that out, but let's just start the discussions at the first point and get to some agreement that generally that would be good for both communities. It would make a lot more sense for...
one of these days on our podcast, I'd like to talk to you about how these boundaries were originally formed in the first place. That could be a little history lesson for everyone out there, because I'd like to know as well.
That'd be a whole podcast, I think.
It would be probably 4 or 5 podcasts.
Probably right. So we'll start those discussions. It is interesting, though, and we're not trying to be harsh on Cabonne. They're trying to be harsh on us. It's just one of those things that makes sense. It probably makes sense down if we go further around Eucarina, some of those areas around there as well. But let's just start with this one. It just seems silly that you've got a town like Yeoval that's cut not through the middle. It's more on the Cabonne side than on the Dubbo side, but it's cut by a creek, and that means that you've got some part in Dubbo and some part in Cabonne. It seems like we could probably fix that problem.
So it sounds like a Monty Python episode. In regards to this one, Matt, actually quite excited about this because I only organised tickets this the other day. Death of a Salesman, one of my favourite plays of all time, the great Arthur Miller classic. Now, there is a performance of this coming to Dubbo, to the DRTCC. Oh, look, I don't know about you, Matt, but I absolutely love this play, and this is a little chance I'd suggest just to plug the DRTCC and some of the things that are coming up there over the next month or so. It
is fantastic having our theatre there. One of the things that people don't realise about our theatre is that it is actually a major tourist attraction in its own right.
Is that right?
About 32% of ticket sales are sold to people outside 2830.
Wow, I did not know that.
I remember when I first got on council, one of the big campaigns when I first stood for council in 2004, I was first elected, one of the big campaigns run by a group called Dubbo Arts, which doesn't exist anymore, was to focus the candidates on getting a theatre for Dubbo. So that was a campaign that really was being driven by people in the community to try and make a change. And it happened, obviously, in the end. We had a special rate variation. We've got a theatre. I was a big supporter of it. I thought it made sense to have a theatre.
Yep.
But I never, ever thought during that campaign that it would be a tourist attraction.
Yes.
But when you've got some excellent staff down there, which we have got, who do manage to organise some fantastic events down there, and this is one of them. So we've got Hearth Theatre, and they're bringing Death of a Salesman. This is one of the texts that I studied way back in Year 12. It was a couple of years ago.
1912 or 1913? When was that?
Something like that. Well, you're being a bit harsh on me because the play was only written in 1949,
That's
so
actually...
it was at least after 1949, thank you. But again, this is one of those things that I think shows the value of our theatre.
Yes.
I guarantee that Hearth Theatre would not bring Death of a Salesman or a production of that quality to somewhere that had a little town hall and a flat floor theatre and not great acoustics. When they bring these sort of events to somewhere like the Dubbo Regional Theatre and Convention Centre, they know they're going to be able to show off their talents at the highest level because they've got a theatre that can take advantage of those talents.
And how often is it the case too when you go along to see these shows and at the end of the show, particularly things like a theatre show where a drama's on, and at the end of it the actors will stand and they'll sort of say, thank you very much, we've had a wonderful night, and how beautiful is this theatre?
You're right, actually. You do often hear that. Even if you go to a comedy festival, they say when you go to something serious, when you go to a ballet, they're all very complimentary about it. But you've got actors like Paul English and Margot Knight coming along, so well-known actors there. Again, Hearth Theatre is well-known as well. 18th of August, I'm not even sure if there have been any tickets left at this stage. They've got two performances, a 10 a.m. one and an 8 p.m. one. I think you're going along taking your students to the 8 p.m. one.
That's right, we are, yes.
Yeah, which is great, good to see that ability again.
Oh, they're excited too, don't worry. They are pumped.
And if you go back a few years, you might have been a very keen teacher and organised a group to get in a bus and go down to Sydney. A great expense to parents and a great concern for teachers taking students on a bus and all the risks associated with that, compared to, say, kids will go down there and meet you at the theatre.
Funny you should say that. Only today I was talking to one of the teachers about this and sort of said, look, going to watch Death of a Salesman with this literacy class I've got. And she said, oh, that's fantastic. So you're going to Sydney, are you, to, getting down there? You're going to go off on a Monday night over and organise it then for the stay over? And I said, no, it's happening here in Dubbo. And she went, oh, my goodness, is that right? It's actually coming here. And I said, yeah, it's coming here. How good is that?
Yeah. So that's what I mean. That's the value people don't always see in what we've got there. But even local productions. I mean, Dubbo Theatre Company's already started Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes.
And you've got some great local talent there.
Yes.
But I know from having done work with Dubbo Theatre Company, you lift your level to another level when you're performing on a stage of that quality.
Oh, yes.
So again, it's great for local performers, it's great for school groups, it's great for the local of Stedford, and great for these various productions that come along through Dubbo.
I'm at looking at this one here. Coming up this week, it's a very special moment there in Wellington, as the fact you have a citizenship ceremony occurring. Now, am I right to say the fact that this is the first time in Wellington that they've actually held a citizenship ceremony? Normally these used to be held in Dubbo, wouldn't they?
Well, the first time I've done one in Wellington.
Right.
It's not the first time ever, because if you go
Okay,
back...
so they have had a few before.
That's right. If you go back to the old Wellington Shire Council,
Yes.
they would have had citizenship ceremonies then.
Sure.
This council, obviously this council that I'm a part of now, we were formed back in December 2021.
Yep.
So in that time...
Is this the first one for the Dubbo Regional Council now?
I don't know whether one was ever done in the first term of council when they
Right.
were elected in 2017 through to 2021, but certainly my first one. So
Yep.
the first one we've done at least since 2021,
Yep.
or December 2021. But it's exciting, and I've talked about one we've done in Dubbo. We did one recently in Dubbo with 38 new citizens. It's exciting, and I'll actually really enjoy going to Wellington to do it because,
Yeah.
again, it'll be a new group and it's open to the public. Anyone can come along. It's on the 25th of July. It'll be at 11 a.m. It's at the Wellington Aquatic Leisure Centre and
okay.
in the
Was
conference
it-
room there.
Ah, right, okay, I
Not
was gonna
in the
say,
pool. Yeah, so we're not going to
Bring your
dunk them
swimmers.
in the water or something.
It'll be 12 degrees, but I'm sure you'll have a lovely time.
That's right. We're not going to be John the Baptist and dunk everyone or something. But look, I do get excited by them, and this will be a much more intimate ceremony because there'll be fewer people being made citizens here in Wellington. But it's great to see Wellington part of that as well, and great to see people coming along, hopefully from the public, to welcome these people into their community.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I note here, Matt, that during the week on your Merrill memo, you wrote about Parkinson's Law of Triviality. What a great title. What a great title indeed. So, look, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on Parkinson's Law of Triviality, but briefly, tell me what it was about.
One of the things I do when I write my Merrill memos, I always like to come up with a topic that's not necessarily just a run-of-the-mill topic that's a thing that council's doing. I like to kind of take one step back and look at something slightly bigger picture.
Nice.
Parkinson's Law of Triviality is something that I've been familiar with for a long time, been involved in lots of committees, whether it be Rotary committees or PNF or council, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And that law, and when I say law, it's an eponymous law, so it's not something that's set in concrete.
So this is Parkinson's in the title. Eponymous meaning the fact that the name of the person's in the title.
Yeah, so it's like Murphy's Law, that type of thing. Yep. So the Parkinson's Law of Triviality says the time spent on any agenda item will be inversely proportional to the sum of money involved. And it's actually, there's some behavioural research.
True.
It is. There's some behavioural research that goes into it, that when you get something that's a small decision, then you can understand it a bit better. So you debate it at length.
Yes.
When you get a really big decision, sometimes it's just too complicated. And one of the things I think of is, for example, if you had a large commercial development, you had a board of directors sitting around talking about it.
Yes.
They might briefly go past the planning, the project, the regulatory rules, because they don't necessarily understand the intricate details.
Yes.
But when it comes to the car park, they'll all talk about exactly how much
We've all
room
got
you
a
need for a
car.
car
We'll go to the
park.
car park. I've got an opinion on this.
I
All
know
the
how
other
to drive a
bureaucratic
car.
stuff, I don't know too much. I'll just nod approvingly. Yes.
And that's it. So
Yes.
you'll debate the car park size at great length. But when it comes to the hundreds of $1 million spent on the development, you go, oh, that sounds okay.
That's about right.
I've been involved in previous times with councils that have approved the annual budget within minutes. A large sum of money.
We're talking $250 million here, $250 million.
And in this particular budget, that's exactly right. And I was interested to see, and I did mention this to councillors, I was interested to see whether Parkinson's Law would hold for this group of councillors or whether we're a little bit different. And I was actually quite impressed. We spent 35 minutes at the council meeting debating our $250 million
There you
budget.
go. That's pretty impressive.
That was
Happy
longer
days.
than I thought, because we've
Yes.
had workshops and things beforehand
Yes,
as well.
yeah. So a little bit more extra knowledge probably leading into that one. Yes, well
Exactly
done.
right. But again, I've seen budgets approved in much shorter timeframes than that. But then at that same meeting, to maybe give Parkinson's Law of Triviality a little bit of credibility, at that same meeting, there was over an hour that was spent at that meeting discussing and deliberating the location of the state government's alcohol and other drugs facility.
Is that right?
And the irony is, of course, that we have no jurisdiction to actually say where that
don't,
particular
do you?
facility
That's
will be located. Yet we
Yes.
spent over an hour on that,
Yes.
35 minutes we spent on a $250 million budget. So-
Parkinson's Law of Triviality strikes again.
exactly.
Big week this week, Matt. We've got the council meeting that's coming up this week. And, this is actually quite nice because it's actually going to be the first time that the new chamber is going to be used.
So we'll have an official opening of the new chamber.
Ooh,
We're inviting along
flash.
all former councillors,
Oh, is that right?
former directors to come along
Fantastic.
to the official ribbon cutting. Councillor Lewis Burns has volunteered to do a smoking ceremony, so that'll
lovely.
be very
Very
exciting.
nice.
Well, that'll be
Yeah.
outside the chamber. We don't want to have the smoke alarms go off.
That's right.
But no, it's a big occasion, I think, about a new chamber. You don't do this very often.
Doesn't happen very often, no. That's right.
1980 was the last time that we
Wow,
had
there you go.
a new chamber. So it's something that I think is significant.
Yeah.
It's a council meeting anyway, so we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
That council meetings, decisions are made, resolutions are made. This is where rubber hits the road, and this is where the resolutions, we can have all the chats and all the workshops and all the rest of it. When we get to the council meeting, that's when the decisions are made. So tune in, come along and look at it in person.
Tuesday night, is that right?
Thursday night.
Thursday night, sorry, yes,
at
Thursday night.
5:30. Come along. We encourage people to come along or at least tune in at home and actually
Yes.
watch and see the process and how it all works. But this one's a bit different
Yes.
because it's the first meeting in a new chamber. Hopefully it all works the way it should work.
Yep.
But I think councillors are pretty excited about this. This is a big decision.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing about all the feedback next week. Well, Matt, big program. Got through a lot there today. And of course, at the end of our program each week, a little podcast, you do your Limerick of the Week. So, from this big program today of areas we focus on, what are you going to focus on for your Limerick?
Always a trouble to find the highlight of the week because there's so much. I mean, there's so many things we've talked about
Absolutely.
there. So many things we didn't talk about because
That's
there's just not enough time.
Yes.
But this week, I think the highlight for me was Samuel Johnson's visit and
Yes.
making Dubbo, hopefully, a world first in precision medicine. So, Samuel, this is a limerick for you.
Oh, wonderful.
In Dubbo, Sam Johnson did stand with an archable prize in the land. He gazed at his face in that gallery space, saying, "It captures me quite grand."
I have to say, that's probably one of your best ones yet.
Oh, you say that every
I
week.
know, but I genuinely mean it this week. That was actually a really good one. It just seemed to sort of really work. That was fantastic. Well done. Good on you, mate. All right, folks, that wraps us up again for another episode of Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, everybody, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.